Welcome back. Chapter 14, Lady and the Tramp. Lady and the Tramp was the headline. Mr. Stern had been true to his word, and the story had made the front page of the Times. A large photograph of Mother and Mr. Stink accompanied the piece. Mr. Stink was smiling broadly, showing his blackened teeth. Mother was trying to smile, but because of the smell, she had to keep her mouth firmly closed. As soon as the paper boy put the paper through the letterbox, the crumbs pounced upon it and devoured it in a frenzy. Mother was famous. She read the article out loud with pride. Mrs. Crumb may not look like a political revolutionary in her smart blue suits and pearls, but she could well change the way we live our lives. She is standing for MP in her own local town, and although her policies read as very hard line, she has taken the extraordinary step of inviting a tramp to live with her family. It was all my idea, said Mrs. Crumb, pronounced Croom, Mrs. Croom. At first my family was dead against it, but I just had to give this poor, filthy, flea-ridden, dirt-encrusted, stomach-turningly smelly beggar man and his abhorrent hound a home. I love them both dearly. They're part of the family now. I couldn't imagine life without them. If only other people were as beautifully kind-hearted as me. A modern-day saint, some people are saying. If every family in this country was to let a tramp live with them, it could solve the problem of homelessness forever. Oh, and don't forget to vote for me in the forthcoming election. It's a genius idea and could put Mrs. Crumb in line to be Prime Minister. The tramp, known as Mr. Stink, had this to say. Please, could I trouble you for another sausage? Ooh, so she's made it to the paper. It wasn't your idea, Mother, snapped Chloe, too angry to merely sulk. No, not strictly speaking, dearest, no. Chloe glared at her, but at that moment the telephone rang. Get that, will you, someone? It's probably for me, said Mother grandly. Annabelle dutifully picked up the phone. Croom residence, who is speaking, please? She asked as her mother had instructed her to. Mother had even had a special telephone voice, a lot posher than her usual one. Who is it, dear? Said Mother. It's the Prime Minister, replied Annabelle, putting her hand over the mouthpiece. The Prime Minister? She held herself towards the telephone. Mrs. Croom speaking, said Mother in a truly ridiculous voice, a note posher than even her usual telephone one. Yes, thank you, Prime Minister. It was a super piece in the newspaper, Prime Minister. Mother was drooling again. Dad rolled his eyes. I would be delighted to be a guest on Question Time tonight, Prime Minister, said Mother. Then she went quiet. Chloe could hear a murmur from the other end of the line, followed by silence. Mother's jaw dropped open. What? She growled into the phone, losing her poise and dignity for an instant. Chloe looked at Dad questioningly, and he shrugged. What do you mean? You want the tramp to go on as well? Said Mother. Dad grinned. Question Time was a serious political discussion program hosted by a sir. It was Mother's big chance to shine, and she obviously didn't want to it ruined by an old tramp. Well, yes, I know what makes a good story, but does he really have to be on? He reeks. There was another pause while the Prime Minister spoke, the murmur getting a little bit louder. Chloe was impressed with the man. Anyone who could get Mother to stop talking for a moment deserved to run the country. Yes, well, if that's what you really want, Prime Minister, then yes, of course, I will bring Mr. Stink along. Thank you so much for calling. By the way, I make a very moist lemon drizzle cake. If you ever passing by in your battle bus, I would be delighted to offer you a slice or two. No? Oh, well, goodbye. She checked one last time that he had definitely gone. Goodbye! Chloe rushed into the garden to tell Mr. Stink the news she heard. She heard a "Urgh" and assumed it must be the Duchess. However, it was actually Elizabeth, the cat, who was growling. She was looking up at the roof of the shed, where a trembling Duchess was hiding. The little black dog was yelping softly. Chloe chased Elizabeth away and she eventually coaxed the Duchess down. She patted her. There. That nasty puss is gone now. Elizabeth flew out of the bushes and through the air like a kung fu kitten. A terrified Duchess rocketed up the apple tree to safety. Elizabeth prowled around the trunk, hissing malevolently. Chloe knocked on the shed door. Hello? Is that you, Duchess? Came Mr. Stink's voice from inside. No, it's Chloe. He's nuts. Should have thought, of course it's me. Oh, lovely Chloe, do come in, dear heart. Mr. Stink upturned a bucket. Please, take a seat. So did your mother and I make the newspaper? You're on the front page, look. She held up the newspaper and let it out a little chuckle. Fame at last. And that's not all. We just had a call from the Prime Minister. Winston Churchill? Now, to give you an idea, Winston Churchill was a Prime Minister about 90 years ago. 95 years ago. Let's go nearly 100 years ago. 2 terms, okay? Long time ago. No, we've got a new one now. And he wants you and Mother to go onto the program called Question Time Tonight. On the television box. The TV, yeah. And I was thinking, before you go on, Chloe looked at Mr. Stink hopefully. It might be a good idea if you had a, yes, child? Well, she finally plucked up the courage to say it, bath. Mr. Stink looked at her suspiciously for a few seconds. Chloe! Yes, Mr. Stink? I don't smell, do I? How could she answer that? She didn't want to hurt Mr. Stink's feelings, but then again it would be much easier to be around him if he were introduced to Mr. Soap and his charming wife, Mrs. Water. Ha, good joke. No, of course you don't smell. Chloe gulping the biggest gulp that had ever been gulped. Thank you, my dear. Then why do people call me Mr. Stink? In her head, Chloe heard the intensely dramatic music from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. That would, in fact, have been the £1 million question. But Chloe had no 50-50, no ask the audience, and not even phone a friend at her disposal. After a long pause in which you could have watched all 3 of Lord of the Rings films in their specially extended director's cuts, words started to form in Chloe's mouth. It's a joke, she heard herself saying. A joke? Yes, because you actually smell really nice, so everyone calls you Mr. Stink as a joke. Really? His suspicion seemed to be thawing a little. Yes, like calling a really small man Mr. Big, or a really thin person Fatso. Oh, yes, I understand. Most amusing, chuckled Mr. Stink. The Duchess looked at Chloe with a look that said, you had the chance to tell him, but you chose to carry on the lie. How do I know that the Duchess's look said this? Because there is an excellent book in my local library entitled 1000 Doggy Expressions, explained by Professor L. Stone. I digress. But, said Chloe, you might have to have a bath. Well, just for fun. Okay, so make a few predictions to yourself. Mr. Stink is about to go on to this question time show with the mum, who is a bit intense, isn't she? So, she's very passionate about what she does, which is a great thing. But she's not very aware of people around her. Really what we call her emotional intelligence might not be super high. So we need to support her and teach her that, don't we? Getting back to Mr. Stink, I wonder how he will go on this. And we know there's a bit of a history to Mr. Stink. There's some stories. Remember, Chloe's putting a few things together. Maybe something will come out in the next couple of chapters. Thanks, team.